Someone in my comments suggested this film recently. It's one of my favourite types of movie, a sci-fi horror. You know how I know it's sci-fi horror? This spaceship is an American-British joint effort, and we'd never work with the Americans. Welcome to a retrospective. This is LifeForce, a 1985 sci-fi horror. I've said that, haven't I? Now this is a big production, if you can call MGM big. And I own the director's cut, or the international cut if you like, so some viewings may vary. To say this film borrows from Alien would be a massive under-exaggeration. The big difference is bats. Thousands of bats. Space bats, I guess. Well, that's one way to take a sample. Anyway, although this film starts as an Alien ripoff with a Star Trek flavour, it morphs, or should I say, xenomorphs into... Sorry, I got blindsided by that spaceship's butthole. It morphs into a couple of different movies before settling on what it finally becomes. A space vampire film. Yeah, it bends and breaks some of the vampire conventions, but that's important to change, and I'll go through each change and why it's important as the film goes on. Also, Space Vampire is the name of my band. You find 3 people on the ship. 2 naked men and a naked woman, who all the spacemen, not the naked ones, the clothed ones, are all horny over. Once on the ship they scoot a few months ahead. Now the Churchill, that's the name of the ship by the way, is found orbiting the Earth. To prove we're in space, here's some shots upside down. Because you know, gravity. Once aboard the ship itself and the crew aboard are both found lifeless. Naked Nelly here and her 2 naked noughts are still in the crystal chambers, so it can't be them. The 3 nudie aliens are presumed dead, so it's time to do what humans do best. Get Ant and Dec on the phone and do an alien autopsy. Obviously if you're going to cut up an alien, you're going to choose the woman. They've got more bits. Lady Alien is played by Mathilda May, French-born actress, whom we won't get to see much of during the movie, mainly because she's naked most of it. What you sort of missed was her sucking the energy out of one of the scientists, who was set to perform the autopsy after sucking his face. May really brings an unearthly element to her role, with her almost translucent white skin and her dubbed performance, leaving bodies looking like, well, that. Well, I can only describe as Iron Maiden's Eddie, or me when I haven't drank water in 3 days. If you haven't guessed it, and if you haven't read the whole title of the video, she's a vampire of sorts. Part of the holy trinity of milking an idea to death. Vampires have been science fiction fodder a bunch of times, but LifeForce is probably the better knowing of the few. Better known is a relative term. There was a few space vampire movies during the 50s and 60s, Not of This Earth, Planet of the Vampires, and The Thing from Another World. Yeah, the movie that ended up being reimagined into The Thing. The cinematic well isn't that deep. Buck Rogers has a vampire themed episode, and Star Trek did it twice. Obsession in 67, and in 66 they did Man Trap, where an alien vampire sucks the salt out of people. There was a lot of drugs during the 60s obviously, and that's sort of how this film is. It's a Star Trek movie. The LifeForce alien vampires are energy vampires. Not like the people who go to parties and bring the night down, but people who literally suck the energy from people. The 2 vampire dudes are up and about, and Terminator level undressed, before they're turned into colanders. Now it's time to get all knifey with a desiccated corpse. Ever wondered why it's only corpses and coconuts that get desiccated? Oh, he's up and about. Get this man a Baraka, stat! So when I say space vampires, I mean space vampires in a very literal sense. Get bit by a vampire, you become a vampire. The transference of energy makes more energy vampires. Again, obviously used in normal vampire movies, although more commonly, in the historic stories, the vampires need to give blood back to turn somebody into a vampire. Think the Tom Cruise movie, not Mission Impossible, Interview with a Vampire. The first published vampire story is now over 200 years old, so there's a lot of media to borrow from and adopt into your story. And the idea of vampire-like creatures is much older than that. I would probably argue that zombies are a sort of vampire. The reason I bring up zombies is because they have something historically that vampires don't have, a ticking time bomb. Turning into a vampire is pretty instant in stories and movies, but in LifeForce there's a 2-hour window where they go from dead to space vampire, then dead again. It's something that vampire movies have been missing, and probably why they haven't stuck around as much as zombie movies. The danger of a ticking time bomb. There's no countdown to become a vampire, no on-screen countdown like Die Hard at least. There's also no downside. Oh, I can't go out during the day, big whoop. Best things happen at night anyway. Oh, I have to kill people, who cares? With no downside to being a vampire, there's no danger. but by adding the idea of not being fed makes you look like you've stayed in the bath for too long, and not feeding for 2 hours turns you into walking dandruff. That adds a danger zone. And that's important when reinventing a classic concept. Looking what there is and isn't, what's working and what's not, evolving things enough without losing the core of the project. That's something we do with vampire movies a lot. But projects that reinvent themselves time and time again without losing their core values is something that I'll mention a lot. Something like Star Trek. Patrick Stewart! I forgot if you mentioned Star Trek 3 times in a mic. Patrick Stewart shows up. Mr. Sheen here runs a hospital for the criminally insane. This is where sexy vampire lady is now hiding, being she's now hijacked the body of a nurse. Again, this is just a reimagining of vampire lore. It's more of a stretch, but this could be considered some sort of hypnosis. Like that time Bela Lugosi stroked an invisible cat. This is where the film feels like it's padded out. Now they've added this jumping from body to body part, they have to find the vampire lady, who's now possibly a man. She's in a child killer's body, who's been put in solitary confinement because
he's been naughty.
Wait, was the vampire lady Professor X? I guess you wouldn't hire Picard and give him a bit role. They hypnotise Gru here. I say hypnotise, I mean they scream into his face. And now he's under hypnosis, they start getting to the bottom of everything. The only man living from the space mission that brought the space vampires back, wow, that's a sentence, he's mentally linked to the lady vampire psychically. The feminine shape she chose was created in his mind. Good thing he wasn't thinking of Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Speaking of that, we get a very Ghostbusters-like scene where shit hits the fan and vampire spirits whiz around the room before Megamind is killed with these 2 needles in the neck. Oh, he's not dead, he's just very damp. This is where we start to get the other vampire motif. How do we kill a vampire? We've seen the sun doesn't work here, so that's a no-go. The other way? Stake in the heart. Okay, but a chunk of wood isn't very fancy in this day and age. So make an ionized lead, which would kill most people if you jab them in the ribcage. Now we get to the final missing part of vampire lore left. Blood. Gallons of the stuff.
Gallons of the stuff.
Oh, thanks Picard, just what we needed. The blood is kind of used as a way of jumping from body to body, like in the old Vampire Curse. But it's also added this 3D printer use. Your body's gone? Just print a new one. I think that's all the vampire things, right? Now we've ticked all them boxes, we can jump straight into the zombie stuff. Like this panic on the streets of London. As I said at the start, I feel like zombies and vampire movies are rooted deep within each other's lore. In early zombie movies, without the E, stuff like White Zombie and Zombie, the zombies weren't bitten, and this is the spooky point, but were hypnotised by creatures thousands of years old. You picking up what I'm laying down? Vampires and zombies, we started off as the same thing, and were separated maybe before films even got their grubby hands on them. But they were separated, and although there are a few movies which sort of bring back the ideas together, I feel like LifeForce is the only one that seems to mix them together without one almost being obscured by the other. It's too bad that it had to have this layer of science fiction smog, because to be honest with you, although the campy science fiction is the part that drew me to the movie, it's also the part of the movie now that seems to be getting in the way. When it could just be a straightforward zombie vampire movie, or a Zampire movie as I would like to call it, it had to have this spaceship sucking energy from Earth's edge. But this is the other thing, how this film isn't one of the holy grails of odd movies, I have no idea. Because it is. It's one of them films where too many ideas at once don't ruin it. And it just makes a tasty cinematic treat. Thanks for watching. Be kind. Rewind. Don't forget to like, subscribe, we have more videos to watch over here, and if you want to watch this movie, the link is below. You can also see my socials there. Follow me on Twitch where I play games as junky as this movie every Wednesday and Sunday. Thanks again.